Welcome to Wind Down Wednesday. Here are your hosts, Jeffrey Tobias Halter and Amanda Hammett.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Today we're going to be focusing on Disability Pride Month, which is this month. And we're going to continue to delve into the role that each of us has in creating inclusive workplaces. So for those of you who don't know, my name is Amanda Hammett, and today I am drinking my Old Faithful, my kombucha. Jeffrey, my favorite co-host, what are you drinking today?
Thank you, Amanda. I'm enjoying a nice French roast decaf today.
Oh!
So winding down a little. I know, shaking things up. So we like to have fun with this, but it is my absolute honor to welcome Catarina Rivera back to Wind Down Wednesday. We spoke earlier with her in the year about disability awareness. And just to remind you of her background, Catarina Rivera is a disability public speaker and DEI consultant who works with companies to improve disability awareness, inclusion, and accessibility. She has been featured in NASDAQ, Authority Magazine, and as one of the top 21 DEI influencers of 2021. Past clients include HarperCollins Publishers, LinkedIn, Whole30, Grant Thornton, and BCG Digital Ventures. She is the founder of Blindish Latina, platform smashing disability stigmas through storytelling. Catarina is hard of hearing and blind. She has a BA from Duke, a master's in education from Bank Street College of Education, and an MPH from Hunter College. Catarina is a certified professional in accessibility core competencies.
Well, Catarina, welcome back to Wind Down Wednesday. What's your beverage of choice today?
I have to stay hydrated, so I will promote water.
Love it.
Well, water is always a good wind down beverage of choice. So, Catarina, we're going to kick off. Just tell our audience a little bit more about Disability Pride Month.
I'm so excited to have the opportunity to talk more about Disability Pride Month because not everybody knows about it. And Disability Pride Month occurs from all of July, the entire month of July. The first Disability Pride Day was held in Boston in 1990. July is the anniversary of the passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act, also known as the ADA. While Disability Pride Month is not as well known as other months, I think it's gaining traction, especially within the disability community. The concept of disability pride is subversive, but it shouldn't be. The message is, I'm proud of who I am, and that includes my disability identity. Our pride is also allowed to be nuanced. Disability is not always great. Sometimes there are challenges. There are people who have regular symptoms related to their disability. Oftentimes, beyond that, what's most challenging is not being included in our world. That is more challenging than the disability itself. So I do want to emphasize that pride and who we are in our identity is complex, and it's not everything is amazing. But society does tell disabled people that we're disposable, that we don't contribute and we don't matter. These are real messages that we are getting from society. But our pride acts against these ableist messages. We're whole just as we are. We are valuable just as we are.
So, Catarina, in our earlier interview, you talked about disability awareness and inclusion in the workplace, along with some discussions on ableism and microaggressions. Would you mind building on your earlier tips on how each of us can feel more confident and comfortable talking about disabilities, especially in the workplace?
Disabled people often feel unseen, especially within the lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. Accessibility is also often left out of conversations, initiatives, planning. Feeling confident and comfortable talking about disability is important. This can help disabled people feel seen and supported, and we do need these conversations to exist. Oftentimes, being uncomfortable talking about disability comes from a lack of exposure to disabled people and our authentic voices. Some of the things that I would suggest are to see what's already out there so that you can get more exposure for yourself. I would suggest watching the documentary Crip Camp, which is incredible. It's available on Netflix and it's also available for free on YouTube. They have a website as well with a curriculum and tons of discussion questions. A great book to read is called Disability Visibility, edited by Alice Wong. And it has chapters or contributions from many different disabled people on so many different topics. It's a very powerful read. And I love that it's celebrating disabled voices. Let's talk about social media. You're probably on social media for hours every day. So why not add some disabled voices to your timeline? There's so many creators, and we are creating funny content, relatable content about all of our interests. So by adding some disabled creators to your feed, that will also help you to learn, because there is a lot of sharing that we're doing. When we're getting ready to talk about disability, remember that we want to say the word disabled, say the word disability. Remember that it's not a bad word. When you're talking to one person and maybe you're going to identify them somehow, ask them how they self-identify. That's a great way to show respect and learn more about the people that you interact with on a regular basis. What should I call you, or what term do you prefer? If someone discloses a disability to you, I often talk about this scenario because it's happened and it's so important to respond well. When they talk about a disability with you, just listen. You can say, "Thank you for sharing that with me," or "I appreciate you trusting me with this." Remember that disability is not necessarily a problem to be solved, and you need to meet people where they are. They might not be asking you for support right then, but let them know. You can let them know that you're available to support them, but don't move the conversation to action or support unless they are ready. Another thing that's so important to do is if you commit a microaggression, it is okay. Pause and change your language. Acknowledge openly that you are working on it and be transparent about your learning journey. This can be a very powerful model for other colleagues and for your team members. I think that is really something that builds trust. And a lot of people don't know what to do when they make a mistake. That's what you do. You acknowledge it right then and there in the moment and make that correction. So those are some tips for getting more comfortable. Overall, it's a learning journey and it takes time.
That's great. And thank you so much for sharing those. Let's shift gears now and talk about what are tips for organization? What can we do on a corporate level to be more inclusive or demonstrate our own awareness? What do you want corporations to do?
One question that employers and companies can consider is whether they've had a training or professional development opportunity related to disability in the past 12 months. I think this is a great question because you're asking for recent activity. And I post this as a poll on my LinkedIn. Most people have not. That's the spoiler alert. But for actual data, you can go to my LinkedIn and see. Another question that companies can ask themselves is, do your managers know how to respond to disability disclosure? Have you given them some guidelines? That's how you build culture, when everyone is approaching situations the same way and has that support of guidelines from. Are your managers aware of the support that can exist for employees? Are they aware of the accommodations process? Is that clear for everyone? Because oftentimes managers don't really know their role in that process, and they don't necessarily know how to guide the employees in relation to the HR process, where the form is, or what's the first step, what's the second step, any tips. And this is a great thing, a basic thing to make sure your managers are equipped to do. If you're looking for a resource externally to help with accommodations, I recommend the website askjan.org, the Job Accommodations Network. Prioritize disability awareness as one of your core training topics for all employees. That's something that would be great for all companies to do. I recommend that companies provide guidance on inclusive language for disability, creating that consistent perspective on what language you are going to use related to disability is great. Including disability within your diversity statements, anything that is published internally or externally related to your commitments is very important. And then evaluate whether you have disability representation within your executive leadership and your board.
Wonderful. Those are all fantastic tips. You brushed on this lightly just a second ago, but I was wondering if you could give some specific tips for managers.
Mm-hmm. To build on what I was saying earlier, managers should know the accommodations process at their workforce, that they should know how to respond to disability disclosure. If they're not getting the guidance from if you're not getting the guidance, you're a manager and you're not getting that from leadership, I recommend that you come up with a plan and you get resources for yourself. Also, please take the time to learn about disability on your own and don't ask disabled employees to teach you. If someone wants to share something with you, great. But the onus of responsibility should be on yourself to take the time to learn. One great thing that I think all managers should do is learn how to lead inclusive meetings, because that is something you're doing all the time. You're running meetings, you're hosting meetings. Some of best practices that you can include are sending out an agenda ahead of time, asking an open-ended question when you are asking if your attendees have questions. So I would recommend saying, what questions do you have? That sends the message that you are expecting questions, you are receptive. And it's not a yes/no response, like, do you have any questions? Because a lot of times the flow goes, do you have any questions? Nobody says anything. And then the leader says, great. And so it's a positive word that kind of reinforces that it's great not to have questions. So change up your language there. Provide flexibility always to your team members. For example, allowing people to be off camera if they need to be, allowing them to decide whether to be on camera or not can be so inclusive for people for so many reasons. One simple reason, say that someone is autistic and they're stimming. Maybe they don't want to be doing that on camera and feeling like people are going to be observing them or questioning them. Another great thing for meetings is provide multiple ways for people to participate and value all of them equally. Because when you are just having people share verbally, that prioritizes a certain type of person with certain privileges or a way of being. And the last thing that I'll share for inclusive meetings is also provide information in multiple ways, not just verbal. I know that I hear from people who have ADHD that it's very hard to process verbal information only. So it's so helpful for them. Like captions are actually very helpful, or having written out summaries, something else that they can reference.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, this has actually been really great information, but Jeffrey, why don't you wrap us up today?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Before we go, I have one quick question, and it kind of builds on the tips you just gave. But if there's one thing you could ask allies to do, what would that be?
I would ask allies to take action, bring up disability and accessibility in all decision-making and planning processes that you are a part of. You don't have to have the solution or strategy, but make sure that disability is being considered, because there are so many rooms where decisions are being made that disabled people are not a part of, and it impacts them. And then as an ally, just always make sure to amplify disabled voices. Don't center yourself as an ally.
Well, thank you so much. This has been another amazing educational session. Catarina, thank you for joining us today. For our listeners, you can download Catarina's free ebook on accessibility from her website, CatarinaRivera.com, where you'll also find out more information about her work. You can also follow her on Instagram at BlindishLatina for the latest updates. It's been our pleasure to have you in again and to educate our audience. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks again for joining us for Wind Down Wednesdays, a contemporary midweek discussion on current workplace and marketplace issues with a focus on diversity, inclusion, intersectionality, and equality. I'm Amanda Hammett, and on behalf of myself and Jeffrey Tobias Halter, thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you for joining us for Wind Down Wednesday. If you like this episode, please subscribe to receive more episodes straight to your inbox.